Two of the biggest legends in the rap game, Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre, have come together, joined forces for an all-new album, Missionary.
I'm so excited for this one. It was something that I saw teased a little while ago, and now it's finally here. We can actually jump into it. So let's not delay and go straight into the first track, which was Foreplay, which is more of just an intro track than anything.
Yeah, a cool little intro. Obviously, the cover of the album is a condom as well. So Foreplay, going straight into things, kind of works with the theme of the album, but we'll quickly move on to Shangri-La. Big ups to Call of Duty World at War.
So this has an insane flow from the get-go. Like, I feel like Snoop has packed a lot of his better flows and lyrics into the first couple of songs on this album, and the first verse that he delivers is vile. Like, it's so good.
My first thought when listening to this song for some reason is it feels like it's been many years since I've heard Snoop just go straight in with some clean bars. The only time I've really heard him is in features in recent years, at least in my head. Obviously, he has released his own solo stuff, but I felt like I haven't heard straight up Snoop delivering flames in a minute, so it was a good introduction to the album.
Yeah, it was nice to hear him return to form of sorts, and also to hear Dre's production on this track as well. Classic Dre, so you know what you're going to get into. You're going to get classic Snoop, and you're going to get classic Dre. We move on to the next one, which is Out of the Blue, featuring Dr. Dre and Alice. So this is a track where we actually get Dre rapping.
I know, very rare. There wasn't much of that throughout the album, to be honest, which I thought was a bit of a shame. But Dr. Dre, an incredible producer, and he really showed that on this track. I think this is probably my favourite song on the album. The production, there's lots going on throughout, lots of bars. It's just exactly what I wanted from this project when I set out listening to it.
There's like a little cowbell or like a glass bottle clinking or something in the background, and it just works. Usually that'd distract you, but I feel like Dre's just really good at building up a whole soundscape, and adding that in just worked nicely. But there's also a little Paper Planes reference in there, isn't there, of MIA?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's like, it sounds, there's a little rework almost of that, and there's a lot of that throughout this album where they've kind of not sampled so much, but they've taken snippets from other big songs and thrown them in, which I quite like.
But we move on to Hard Knocks. What did you think of that one, Tim?
Gospel-esque intro, goes hard with the organ, goes hard with all that stuff, and then there's also a Leave Them Kids Alone reference in there, which is the Pink Floyd Another Brick in the Wall reference, which again, another reference in this album. And then there's a beat switch around 2 minutes in, which came out of nowhere, but works so well.
I must admit, I think the beat switch was the best thing about this track. To be honest, I wasn't a huge fan of the intro, and I wasn't a huge fan of the outro. I thought the middle section of the song was good, along with that beat switch. It changed the vibes nicely. But I don't know, the start and end of this, I just didn't really vibe with too much. So we'll go on to Gorgeous, featuring Gene Aiko.
This was one of the singles that got me hyped up for the album, because it's just certified Dre beat with Dre keys. Everything just screams Dr. Dre. And I would say this is kind of like a certified instant classic type track. I feel like it's one of those that you could hear and you couldn't tell if it was released in 2024 or 2005. You know what I mean?
I don't know if I'd go as far as instant classic, but I certainly preferred Snoop's delivery on this versus Hard Knocks, the previous track. Calm little song. I think, as you say, it kind of encapsulates what you want from Snoop and Dre in a track.
This brings Snoop's old school flow into it rather than it being this new flow that we're quite used to these days. It kind of felt like he threw it back a bit. And then we move on to Last Dance with Mary Jane, featuring Tom Petty and Jelly Roll.
Really random. I thought this track was incredible, to be honest. It had a different feel to it. I like the little harmonicas coming in. I just thought, we've mentioned a few times, this feels like what you'd expect. This feels like what you want from Snoop. This kind of didn't, and I liked it for that reason. Having Tom Petty in there, having Jelly Roll in there, I thought it was a well put together track.
Having Tom Petty on there makes sense because weed, and that's all they talk about. So, you know, with the song being about Mary Jane as well, it all adds up. But Jelly Roll is everywhere right now. He was featured on M's album as well. There's been another couple of features that he's done recently. The man just cannot be stopped. He seems to be going from strength to strength to strength, and I actually really like his voice on this track. It works very nicely.
He's fantastic. I just see him literally on every feature at the minute. You go from MGK to Snoop and Dre, really strange world we live in. But we'll move on to Thank You, which was a pretty quick track, really.
Yeah, there was a Sly and the Family Stone sample, which worked very nicely. I'm surprised no one's done it before. They might have, but nobody's done it to this caliber. And I didn't think I'd hear it on such a heavy beat, though. Like, the sample versus the beat felt strange, but it worked. I just didn't think that would happen.
I really like Snoop's delivery on this one again, but I do think at the start of the track, and I think one or two other times throughout, he kind of did a bit of a singing section. Didn't really work.
There's some rappers that just shouldn't sing.
Yeah, but again, when he's delivering bars, clean, but those singing sections kind of put me off of this track. So we'll move on to Pressure featuring Khan, or K-A-A-N.
And Dr. Dre. So this is another one where we get Dr. Dre rapping on it.
I kind of class Dr. Dre as a feature on every track. That's why I've not really mentioned him, because I know that he's not, but he is also producing them. So
because he's doing some production on the album as a whole, that's why it is a Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre project. So I get why the feature is listed, because he's actually rapping on this one. But I'm a big fan of Khan, and he's usually known for his fast and kind of choppy, rapid flow. But on this track, was he providing the singing vocals? What was he doing? I couldn't really hear him.
I'm not entirely sure, but I must admit at this point in the album, I kind of thought to myself, on that note, there's not been a feature that hasn't fit in. Every feature so far has worked really well. I liked the kind of feel of this song. Some strings, some like Indian, Middle Eastern type strings and stuff were coming into the instrumental. And I think that Dr. Dre's variation in instrumentals is really showing at this point.
Yeah, he's very good at just taking noises that you wouldn't expect to hear on a track and throwing it in. And there's also a little Slick Rick's children's story mentioned in this, where it's Dave the dope dealer shooting dope, and Snoop Dogg does something about it's Snoop Dogg the guy, blah blah blah. And I just like how many little throwbacks and references are littered throughout this album. But we move off that onto Another Part of Me featuring Sting.
We never thought we'd see that in our entire lives.
What the hell?
Massive sample of Another Message in a Bottle from Police here. Great track. I really liked this. Do you know what it kind of reminded me of? Obviously not in the same ilk in terms of heaviness, but Collision Course by Jay-Z and Linkin Park, because it was a reworking of a kind of legendary old song that everyone knows that I think they nailed. I think it was fantastic.
Yeah, it was really good. And I think this time Snoop Dogg actually got permission to do it because it's featuring Sting. Because I don't know about if the whole situation with I'll Be Missing You, P. Diddy's track, which does this. Sting gets paid like thousands of pounds a day where every time that gets played, he gets royalties for it. So I feel like Snoop was very careful to go, look, I want to use your sample, but can you give me your blessing first? I'll even feature you on the track. Because I think Sting does provide some unique vocals on this as well. It's not just a sample. But yeah, it looks like Snoop got the blessing.
Well, Skyscrapers is up next, featuring Method Man and Smitty.
Ooh, Meth features goes hard. I was looking forward to this when I saw the track listing.
Meth feature goes hard is a crazy line, bro. Yo, what were you getting up to when listening to this?
I think other than Meth, though, the rest of the track is pretty forgettable. The beat's a little bit mid as well. There's not a whole lot going on, but I think Meth carries this track.
Yeah, the Method Man verse is the hardest part of this track. Straight bars. Obviously, he's unreal, and his feature worked well again. I do agree. I think that one thing about this track, there was a line at the start from Snoop, very braggadocious. He was like, "We're the only two goats left," something along those lines, and I was a bit like, "Ooh,
throwing shots, throwing subliminals."
There you go. But we'll go on to Fire, featuring Coco Sarai.
What a lovely intro of setting someone on fire and then shooting them to then go straight into a reggae rasta beat.
I was so confused. When I was listening, I was like, whoa, is this what's actually happening? They're pouring petrol on someone right now. Yeah. And then it went into like the most chill, calm track ever. What was the thought process there?
I have no idea. All I can think is fire, because they're talking about lighting up a spliff or whatever. And then they're like, should we just throw in a little skit in there of us killing someone and setting them on fire?
Lighting up a spliff is very different to lighting up someone's nan. But the track as a whole was actually pretty decent. I enjoyed it. As I say, again, a different style of track from Dre. And that's one thing I can give this album. The switching in lanes has kept me interested for the majority of it.
I think it was a little bit lackluster for me, because I thought it was going to go like really hard after the intro. I was like, oh shit, we're going to get like almost a horrorcore type track, an early like SSLP type beat, because that's the kind of intro you'd hear on like a really early Eminem track. But we didn't really get any of that, unfortunately.
I have literally got in my notes, like the reggae style, but I think that they could have done more with it. I think if you're going to create a track in that style, like you say, you could have expanded it and made it a bit more oomph, somewhat more to it. Guns and Smoke featuring 50 Cent and Eminem is up next. Pre-warning, Tim absolutely glazes the life out of Eminem, so we know he's going to love this song. Tim, how much did you love it?
Oh, I loved it. I fucking loved it. 50 came in. Didn't expect him to be first up on the track. I think 50 is 50. You know, he always delivers a solid verse. It's not necessarily anything noteworthy, but it's never bad. 50 just always comes in, nails 50. Snoop Dogg then comes in with a nice little verse, quite like that. But the thing that I really liked, and I'm not just going to say it because it's Eminem, but Eminem didn't try and do his fucking lyrical, spiritual, super fast flow. We actually got him slowed down, and it makes me wonder why we didn't hear more of that on the Death of Slim Shady.
But we'll stick to this album. I actually thought that this was a little bit disappointing because with such a star-studded cast, I don't know, I expected a little bit more. And for me, the majority of this song, the 50 and Snoop verses were really short. So it was pretty much just an Eminem track by the end of it. Eminem must have taken up 60% of the runtime, which isn't a bad thing. But I don't know, it wasn't a bad song. But do you know, when you see those three, I was like, ooh, and it didn't quite...
Yeah, I've got a note saying the track could have definitely been better, but I'm happy that we got a different style of M for once. And there's one bar in there where it says, so like that syrup they cancelled, I'ma say fuck you and your mama. But the way that he says it is fuck you Aunt Jemima. On your mama, because it's Aunt Jemima that got cancelled, and I loved that wordplay. Anyway, we'll move off it because I'm going to just keep glazing onto Sticky Situation.
Well, were we getting sticky?
No, it wasn't quite as sticky this time around. But the beat is naughty on the low end. Like when you let your sub ring through on this, oh, fantastic.
I don't know why, but after the last couple tracks at this point in the album, I was kind of just waiting for something to really blow me away. Not even in terms of like lyricism or anything, more in terms of just a hard hitting beat, just something that's a little bit darker and grungier, or there's more levels to it. And this didn't quite satisfy that need. Again, not a bad track, but I was kind of thinking it could be better.
Yeah, we've got Khan on this track again, so I was expecting, okay, he didn't hear his fast flows on the last track. Surely they're going to let him pop off on this one, but still nothing. There's a little beat switch halfway through. Snoop swaps his flow up with that beat switch, and I think it works nicely. But yeah, like you say, it's starting to feel a bit tired at this point.
And we were kind of getting to the point where I was thinking it's now or never for this album to become an all-timer, and that track is featuring BJ, the Chicago Kid. What did you think of it?
It took me a second to realise what you were doing. That was really good. I liked that. I really wasn't feeling this track. It's not my type of track, though, so it's difficult for me to give constructive criticism on it that isn't just meh.
Can I ask, though, do you not think that we've kind of heard this like 4 times throughout the album already?
Yeah.
I was like, this is just a rinse and repeat of previous songs with a slightly different feature and a slightly variated beat. I just thought, I don't know, but we're on to Gangsta Pose featuring, well, I don't even know what that says on my notes.
It's Dem Joint, Stallone, and Fat Money. And I genuinely thought that it said Post Malone initially. And I was like, Posty on a fucking Snoop Dogg track. I was like, I can't believe it. And then obviously I read it again and went, oh, it's not Post Malone.
Kind of similar vibes to the last one. Wasn't a bad track. Felt like I'd heard it before, but it was funky. Features worked really well again. I think if this was at the start of the album, my outlook on it would be much better, but because we're right near the end, second to last track, I'm thinking we could have really done with something a bit more energetic here.
It was very throwaway, and I didn't really like the hook/chorus that was going on. It didn't do a lot for me, but it's a track, isn't it? It's a track.
And we're on to the last track of the album, The Negotiator. What do you think of that one?
Fun beat, fun flow, and a perfect example of how well Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre can work together, I think.
Yeah, another nice track. I thought that this finished off the album well in terms of what we want from this album. This was another example of that. But I also feel like I've said that too many times at this point. So let's go on to some overall thoughts about this project, Tim.
I didn't think it was that shabby for this late era Snoop, if we can call him that. The beats felt like they weren't quite right for Snoop Dogg, though. Some of these beats felt a bit too big for something that Snoop Dogg would usually spit over. So I felt like maybe they would have been better with a different rapper, maybe somebody like Kendrick. Some of the beats I felt were way too heavy to actually
like they
lend
outshone
themselves.
Snoop's
Correct.
vocal delivery. Yeah, I know what you mean. I think the most upsetting thing about this project for me is I was really expecting a lot more Dr. Dre bars, and I love Dre's delivery. I love obviously The Chronic, etc. Some unreal albums. Are we ever going to get a full album of him just spitting bars again? Because I was hoping that this would be like him and Snoop 50-50. In my head, that's what I wanted. It's not what we got at all.
Yeah, he's got a lot of vaulted up stuff, and he doesn't really like putting his name to projects because he likes his discography to be a certain way. So the fact that he put his name to this, I was kind of expecting really big things, because I was like, Dre never puts his name on anything. So for him to say this is Snoop and Dre, I was like, we might be getting some good stuff. And the production, don't get me wrong, the production is fantastic throughout. Great beats, great mixing, everything sounds fantastic. But there wasn't really a whole lot of replay value throughout the entire album, but it is definitely an album that I could put on in the background and just have it playing and not really pay attention to it, which works to its credit, but also it's a good thing, but it's not a good thing. Yeah. You know, it's kind of a mix of both.
I would say that I think that we kind of saw the best version of Snoop that we've seen in a few years, especially on certain tracks. He really shone through with some clean bars, mainly at the start of the album. That first proper track in particular, he was just spitting flames. And I love to see that. Obviously, he's getting on now. How old is he? Is he like 60, 65 or something?
Got to be getting up there.
So it's nice to see that he still has that in him. And this was a good album in many respects. I just think that there could have been a little bit more energy injected into it. A quicker tempo in a few songs, especially in the latter half. But there's one question, Tim, and it is, what would you rate this album out of 10?
So I'm going to give this album a solid 6.5 out of 10. I don't think I'd give it much higher than that because, like I say, there isn't much replayability. But as an album as a whole, it's pretty coherent. You know, it makes sense all the way through. There's nothing in there that's that surprising. But because there's nothing in there that's that surprising, I can't rank it much higher than that.
I'm very similar to you. I'm going in with a 6 out of 10. I think there's no particularly awful tracks on here, but there's only one or two that I'd really want to go back and revisit and explore more. So a 6 out of 10 is very fair in my opinion.
And if you did enjoy this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. We review all the big rap projects. We've done Kanye with Vultures 2. We've done Kendrick recently. We've done a Was It That Bad? Was It That Good? We go through all different artists, the best albums, the worst albums. Just stick around and see what you like.
Peace.